You ever hear a joke that cuts so deep it leaves you bleeding before the laughter dies down? It was my niece's birthday, balloons, too much cake, and that damned karaoke machine screaming in the background. Everyone was gathered around the backyard table when Jessica, my wife of 15 years, decided it was the perfect time to grab the spotlight. She lifted her wine glass, her eyes shining with that performative glee she'd perfected over the years. I should have known something was coming. To family, she called out, raising her voice above the chaos. And to Ryan, the best dad ever, even if none of the kids are his. The laughter was instant, explosive. Even my own mother howled like it was the punchline of a late-night comedy set. My brother slapped my back like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. I tried to laugh too. God, I tried, but my throat seized up, and the sound that came out was more of a croak than a chuckle. I forced a smile wide and tight, because the last thing you do in front of your family is show weakness. Jessica winked at me, taking a long sip of her drink like nothing happened, like she hadn't just cracked open the ribcage of my reality and let doubt crawl in. That night, long after the kids were asleep and the house had quieted down, I brought it up. I stood at the foot of the bed, heart pounding. What the hell was that today? She didn't even look up from her phone. It was a joke, Ryan. Jesus, are you really still thinking about that? You said none of the kids are mine. That's not something you joke about, Jess. She sighed, finally setting the phone down and meeting my eyes with that cold, detached expression that always came out when she was about to gaslight the hell out of me. Ryan, come on. You're overthinking. I was being sarcastic. Everyone laughed. You're the only one still obsessing. Because it didn't feel like a joke, I said. It felt calculated. She rolled her eyes and pulled the covers over her shoulder. You need to lighten up. But I couldn't. That night, sleep never came. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every late night she said she was at the gym, every unexplained charge on her credit card, every time she flinched when I mentioned the kids' baby photos. Doubt is a cancer. Silent at first, but once it sinks in, it metastasizes. By morning, I wasn't just a husband with a suspicion. I was a man preparing for war. Because something told me that joke was no accident. It was a warning, a confession dressed in comedy. And I wasn't about to let it go. You ever feel your stomach drop before the fall even begins? That's what it was like the moment the DNA test kits arrived. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring down at the small boxes like they were loaded weapons. And in a way, they were tools of destruction, truth grenades, each one containing the power to level the illusion I'd called my life. I did it when Jessica wasn't home, said I was taking the kids to the park, but instead, I drove to a friend's place across town, somewhere I knew no one would ask questions. I turned on the TV to distract them, then, one by one, followed the instructions. Swabs, seal the tubes, bag them up. I kissed each of their foreheads when we were done, and it hit me. If these results came back the wrong way, I wouldn't just be losing a wife. I'd be losing my entire identity. I sent them off that night. I didn't tell Jessica, didn't say a damn word. For the next 2 weeks, I lived like a ghost in my own home. I smiled when I had to, ate when I could stomach it, slept with one eye open. She didn't notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. She was always on her phone, always working late. I kept track of it all. Every excuse, every unexplained text, every kiss that felt colder than the last. Then the email came in. Subject line, results available now. My hands shook as I clicked the link. There was a password, then a login confirmation, then the document loaded. 3 names, 3 profiles, 3 betrayals. Probability of paternity, 0%, 0%, 0%. All 3 kids. None of them mine. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember blinking. I just sat there, staring at those numbers, like if I stared long enough, they might change. But they didn't. They held firm, as cold and final as a tombstone. I waited until that night. The kids were asleep. Jessica walked through the front door like nothing had changed, tossed her purse on the couch, and gave me a passing glance. Everything okay? I held up the printed results. Just raised my hand and let the pages speak for me. She blinked at them, then frowned. What's that? You tell me, I said, voice flat. 3 paternity tests. 3 zeros. Her eyes darted across the page, then narrowed. You did this behind my back? You lied to my face for 15 goddamn years. I snapped. My voice cracked, rage boiling under the surface like lava under thin ice. Don't you dare play the victim now, Jessica scoffed, shaking her head like I was being unreasonable. You went behind my back, Ryan. That's a massive breach of trust. My laugh was hollow. Trust? The woman who just confirmed that I've been raising 3 kids who aren't mine is talking about trust? Are you hearing yourself? She crossed her arms. Defensive. Dismissive. DNA doesn't make you their father, Ryan. You are their dad. You raised them. Loved them. No. You lied to them. You lied to me. You used me as a damn safety net while you got knocked up by God knows who. Her face darkened. This isn't just about you. This is about our family. No, I growled, stepping closer. That family died the moment you looked me in the eye and built it all on a lie. She stood there in silence for a beat, then spat. So what now? You gonna run off? Break up their lives? Ruin everything? No, Jessica. You did that. I just finally stopped pretending. She grabbed her purse, like she always did when she wanted to feel in control. I can't deal with this right now. I stared at her as she stormed out the door, and all I could think was how easy it was for her. 15 years of deception, and she walked away like it was just another bad Tuesday. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I walked upstairs and peeked into each of their rooms. My daughter clutched her teddy bear like it was a lifeline. My sons breathed evenly, dreams unbroken by the chaos waiting just outside their doors. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter something, but I didn't. I just stood there, because now I knew the truth. The kind you can't unknow. The kind that festers. And I wasn't going to let it eat me alive. I was going to use it. I used to believe divorce was something other people did. The broken ones. The ones who couldn't hold it together. Not me. Not us. But that was before the illusion cracked, before the joke, before the tests, before the woman I loved turned out to be a professional liar in a house of masks. I stood outside the courthouse, clutching the envelope like it contained a piece of my soul. Inside, the papers. The official beginning of the end. Irreconcilable differences, they called it. What a sanitized phrase for the nuclear fallout that was my marriage. But I wasn't here for symbolism. I was here for blood. I signed where I needed to, eyes scanning each line like a soldier checking for traps. Then I walked straight into that law office and handed it over to the clerk without a word. Her expression was polite, sympathetic, but distant, like she'd seen 1,000 Ryans before me. And she had. Hell, I was just the next casualty in a war I never signed up for. I expected that moment to feel like a weight lifting, but it didn't. Felt like I just buried someone. Someone who looked a lot like me. I drove home on autopilot, the silence in the car thicker than concrete. At some point, I pulled into my parents' driveway. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I thought they'd offer support, comfort, sanity. Instead, I got slapped in the face with their disbelief. My mother sat on the couch, arms folded like I was a teenager who'd skipped curfew. You're divorcing Jessica? Just like that. I blinked at her. Just like that? Mom, she cheated on me. For years. None of the kids are mine. You don't know that for sure, she said, her voice too calm. I pulled the test results from my coat and slammed them onto the table. I do know. Here. You want proof? Read it. She stared at them but didn't touch them. Then came my father, standing behind her like a statue. Son, you really think it's wise to blow up your whole life over something like this? Something like this. Like we were talking about a scratch on a car. Not a betrayal so complete it burned through my DNA. Are you both out of your minds? I hissed. This woman lied to me for over a decade. She let me raise kids that aren't even mine. And now you're acting like I'm the one ruining everything. Mom's voice sharpened. She's still their mother. And they're still your kids. No, I said, my voice low. controlled. They're her kids, her secrets, her consequences. She shook her head, the tears starting. They love you, Ryan. And damn it, that part was true. That was the knife she'd driven deepest. Because I did love those kids. But love wasn't enough anymore. Not when the foundation had been poured with lies. You're supposed to have my back, I said. My voice cracked. But you'd rather keep the family photo looking pretty than admit the truth. Dad finally spoke. Sometimes the truth breaks more than it fixes. I stared at him. This was the man who taught me never to lie, never to cheat. The man who used to say, "A man's word is everything." And now here he was, holding the family fantasy together with duct tape and prayer. "I'm done talking," I said. "The divorce is happening, whether you like it or not." Mom stood up, voice trembling. "If you go through with this, you'll break this family." I looked her dead in the eye. She already did. I left without another word. Got in my car. Drove until the night swallowed the road. At some point, I pulled over in a grocery store parking lot and just sat there, hands on the wheel, trying to breathe. Not a single person in my own bloodline wanted to see the truth. But I did, and I wasn't going to stop. I thought the paternity tests would be the end of the deception. That once the truth was exposed, raw and undeniable, people would finally open their damn eyes. I was wrong. Started small. A missed call from my sister. A vague text from my cousin. "Can we talk?" Then my mother sent a group message inviting Jessica and the kids to Sunday dinner. Without telling me. At first, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they hadn't seen the results. Maybe Jessica was spinning it soft, easing them into the truth with half-lies and damage control. But when I showed up uninvited to my parents' house that Sunday, out of spite more than anything, I walked into the theater of betrayal already in full swing. The kids were laughing in the living room. My dad was pouring Jessica a drink. My mother was plating food, humming like everything was picture perfect. And there she was, Jessica, smiling, charming, glowing like she hadn't detonated our entire life 2 weeks ago. When I walked in, forks froze midair. The air turned electric. Jessica's smile barely twitched. "Ryan," she said sweetly, like my name still belonged in her mouth. "Did I miss the memo?" I said, voice low and sharp. "Family dinner now includes the liar-in-chief?" My mother shot me a look. "Don't start. Don't start." I laughed bitterly. "You invite my ex-wife, the one who lied to me, cheated on me, and saddled me with 3 kids that aren't mine, and I'm the problem?" Jessica stood up, ever the actress. "I'm just here for the kids, Ryan. They didn't do anything wrong." "No," I said, "but you did. And so did everyone else here for pretending like this is normal." Dad stepped forward. "We just don't want them caught in the crossfire." "Then maybe stop giving shelter to the arsonist," I snapped. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "So this is how it's going to be? You turn your own family against me, and when they don't fall for it, you throw a tantrum." "I didn't turn anyone. They turned themselves." She looked at my parents. "Do you hear this? He's obsessed with punishing me, even if it means hurting the kids." And right then, I saw it, the subtle nod from my mother. The way she gently touched Jessica's hand. The way she comforted her. Like Jessica was the victim. I felt something inside me rupture. "You manipulated them," I said quietly, shaking my head. "You came here and twisted the story. Made yourself the grieving mother and me the monster." "I didn't twist anything," Jessica said. "I told them the truth. That you're abandoning the kids. Filing for divorce. Turning cold. They're not my kids." I exploded. "And you damn well know it." The silence after that was suffocating. Even the children in the next room went quiet. And that's when my sister, Michelle, chimed in. "Ryan, honestly, you're being cruel." I turned to her, stunned. "Cruel? You think I'm cruel for not wanting to raise 3 kids from men my wife cheated on me with?" "They don't know that," she said. "They think you're their father. That matters. That lie matters more to you than the truth does to me?" My father cleared his throat, like a judge preparing a verdict. "Ryan, you raised them. You changed their diapers, taught them to ride bikes. DNA doesn't erase that. I stared at them, my whole bloodline, and felt something cold take root in my chest. So let me get this straight, I said. I do the right thing for 15 years. I give everything to a family that isn't mine. And the moment I stop swallowing lies, I'm the villain. Jessica's eyes were wet now. She wasn't crying. No, this was tactical moisture. A performance. They still need you, Ryan, she said. You don't just walk away from love. I laughed. One of those dead laughs. The kind that sounds more like coughing up smoke than amusement. You killed that love, Jessica. You butchered it. And now you're using the kids like a human shield. I turned toward the door, gripping the frame like it might rip off the wall. If any of you want to keep pretending this is fine, go ahead. But don't you ever expect me to play along. My mother's voice stopped me halfway out. They're still your family, Ryan. I looked over my shoulder, ice in my veins. No, I said. You made your choice. You picked her. And you can keep her. Then I walked out. And not a single one of them followed me. When everyone you trust turns their back on you, you learn real fast who you are. Me? I'm not a man who takes betrayal lying down. After that Sunday, after watching my own blood embrace the woman who gutted me, something in me changed. My grief burned off like fog under a rising sun, leaving only something sharp, cold, focused, revenge. No more second-guessing, no more doubt. Now it was about evidence, about facts. If they wanted to play pretend with Jessica, fine. But I was going to force them to choke on the truth. So I hired someone. Not just some sleazy wannabe detective with a camera and a caffeine habit. No, I found a real pro. Ex-cop turned investigator. Guy named Marcus Kane. Discreet. Efficient. No lectures, no judgments. Just results. You want dirt? He asked over coffee. How deep do you want me to dig? Until we hit bone. It didn't take long. Jessica was a creature of habit. Repeating patterns like clockwork. The gym. The late meetings. The sudden girls' trips. The burner phone she kept stashed in her purse, behind a lipstick tube. That one made me smile, so cliché, so amateur. Marcus gave me the first file 2 weeks in timestamps, hotel receipts, call logs. One lover, then two, then three. Three. One of them was a coworker. The second was our old neighbor, the guy who used to ask if I wanted help mowing the lawn. And the third? A man named Dean Mercer, a friend of the family. He held my son at his baptism. He toasted me at our wedding. Dean was the likely father of our youngest. Let that sink in. There were pictures. I didn't ask for them, but Marcus gave me everything. High-resolution shots of hotel room embraces, long car rides with hands too close, text messages with things I wouldn't repeat if you paid me. One of them read, "You should have been their father, not him. He's just safe, safe." That's what I'd become to her. A seatbelt, a guardrail, something to keep her steady while she veered off into her secret life. And she wore it so well. To the world, Jessica was the perfect wife. PTA mom, soccer snacks, Christmas cards with hand-picked fonts. And the whole time, she was lying to my face with the kind of ease that only comes from years of practice. I compiled the evidence, organized it, categorized every sin. My office became a war room. Maps, photos, copies of messages, bank statements. She'd used our joint account to buy gifts for these men. Jewelry, hotel stays, even concert tickets. Marcus found a shared Dropbox folder between her and Dean. I clicked through it at 2 a.m., every photo a dagger. One shot of Dean with his arm around my daughter, who smiled like he was just Uncle Dean. I had enough to destroy her in court. But this wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about exposure. She turned my family against me with lies and manipulation. But lies don't survive the light. And I was done being polite. I printed everything, bound it all in neat black folders. One for each member of my family. One for my parents. One for my sister. One for Jessica. And one for Dean. That one had a note stapled to the front. You'll want a lawyer before your wife sees this. I wasn't just coming for Jessica's mask. I was yanking off every one of them. By the third week, Marcus came to me with something unexpected. "You know how you thought the joke she made was spontaneous?" he said, flipping through a notepad. "Turns out it wasn't." "What do you mean?" "She rehearsed it. With Dean. At his place. We got audio. She practiced saying it in front of a mirror, testing her delivery. Called it her truth grenade. Figured no one would believe it, so she could plant the seed without consequence." I sat in silence. Not even angry, just stunned. "She planned it. Down to the exact words." He nodded. "This wasn't a slip. This was a performance." That's when I knew what I had to do. It wasn't enough to leave. Wasn't enough to divorce. She'd made a mockery of my life. My name. So I'd return the favor. The Sunday confrontation was coming. I had the date, the location, and the evidence. Not a fight, not a tantrum, a reckoning. But before that day came, I looked through the photos one last time. My kids, smiling in some, others caught mid-laugh. Their innocence carved a deep scar into me. They didn't ask for this, didn't deserve it, but they were the shrapnel. And Jessica? She was the bomb. Sunday. The same kind of calm morning you'd expect to start with coffee and end with dessert. But today wasn't about food or family. It was about blood and truth. They thought I wouldn't show. Jessica certainly didn't expect me. But that's the beauty of being underestimated. You get to choose the moment they choke on their certainty. I arrived 5 minutes late. On purpose. Let the anticipation build. I walked into my parents' house wearing black like it was armor. I carried a single box under one arm, small but heavy. Heavy with revelations. With reality. They were all there. Jessica. My parents. My sister, Michelle. The kids playing in the next room. Oblivious. And Dean Mercer. Oh, Dean. Smiling like a man with no secrets. Like he hadn't spent years fucking over a man who called him brother. They didn't notice me at first. Until my father glanced up and the color drained from his face. "Ryan." Jessica turned around, her smile faltering. "Oh, honey," she said. "We weren't sure you'd come." I set the box down on the table with a calm that didn't match the rage clawing at my ribs. "I know," I said. "I wanted to give you a little surprise." I opened the box. One by one, I pulled out the black folders. Each marked with a name. Mom, Dad, Michelle, Jessica, Dean. I set them in a perfect line, like tombstones. "What is this?" Jessica asked. Her voice had an edge to it now, that fake confidence starting to fracture. I looked her dead in the eyes. "Evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Proof. Of every lie you told. Every betrayal you committed. And every man you spread your legs for behind my back." My father stood up. "Ryan, don't. Sit down." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Each of you gets a copy," I continued. "Inside you'll find photos, text messages, hotel records, and burner phone transcripts. Multiple men, multiple years, and, of course, the DNA results." Jessica's hand shook as she reached for her folder. "This is insane." "Is it?" I said, flipping open my own copy and reading aloud. "He's just safe. You're the one I should have had kids with. Jessica Mitchell, texting Dean Mercer, January 17, 2016. Michelle gasped. My mother covered her mouth. Dean stood up. "All right, that's enough." I took a step toward him. "You don't get to talk. You were holding my daughter at her baptism while you were balls deep in my wife. So if I were you, I'd shut the fuck up." His mouth opened, then closed again. "Smart." Jessica's face was pale now. Her mask had cracked. "This is what you wanted, right?" I asked her. "Truth? You called it your truth grenade. Remember? Practiced in front of the mirror with Dean coaching you." She flinched. That one landed. "You think I didn't know? That no one would tell me? You made a joke of my life. Of my name. You thought no one would ever find out." Tears started to build in her eyes. But I didn't stop. "To my family, the ones who believed her over me. That's who you chose. Not just a liar, but a manipulator. A woman who weaponized your sympathy to keep you in her orbit. Michelle was crying now. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. I turned to my parents. You called me cruel, unforgiving. You said I was breaking up the family. No, she did that. And you helped her. Jessica finally snapped. So what now, Ryan? You just humiliate me in front of everyone? That's your big move. No, I said. This is me reclaiming the truth. I reached back into the box and pulled out the final envelope, sealed in red. This one's for the court. Divorce proceedings, full custody challenge, and legal complaints for fraud. You raised 3 kids on a lie. You spent my money on other men. You used my name, my loyalty, my love, and you turned it into your personal playground. She looked stunned. You're trying to take the kids away from me? They were never mine. That was your choice. But I will make sure they know exactly who you are before I walk away. Dean stood up again. I won't let you take this to court. You don't get a say, I snapped. You'll be lucky if your wife doesn't do worse. Page 38. Her name's in there too. Thought she deserved a copy. Jessica collapsed into her chair, sobbing now. The room was quiet. No one moved. No one dared. And I finally felt something I hadn't in weeks. Peace. I looked around the room one last time. This isn't vengeance, I said. This is clarity. This is me burning down the house of lies you built, so no one else has to live in it. Then I turned and walked out the door. No one followed me. This time they couldn't. The silence was worse than the shouting ever could have been. After I walked out of that house, I didn't go home. I drove, aimless, no music, no destination, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing, ragged and shallow. I just scorched the earth behind me, and I didn't feel regret, not even close, but I also didn't feel triumph, just silence. I pulled over at a gas station miles outside town and sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older, not in years but in weight, a man stripped of illusions, of hope, of the family he thought he had. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel something. It wasn't rage. Not anymore. It was grief. Grief for the life I thought I had. For the kids I thought were mine. For every lie I mistook for love. The fallout came fast. Jessica tried calling. Once, then twice, then 6 missed calls. A voicemail that started with "We need to talk" and ended with "You're hurting the kids." I didn't answer, didn't listen. I'd already heard all the lies I'd ever need. Then came my mother. She texted me the next day. We had no idea. I'm so sorry. Please call. I didn't. Let her sit with the mess she helped enable. Michelle wrote a longer message, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, saying she felt like a fool. She was. They all were. But they chose to be. They didn't just miss the signs, they ignored them. Because it was easier to believe Jessica than it was to believe that the perfect little family might be built on quicksand. 3 days later, Jessica left the house, packed up her things while I was gone, didn't say goodbye. She left a note on the counter, the kind written more for her own conscience than mine. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I never meant to hurt you. Please remember the good times. The good times? Those are hard to cherish when you realize they were built on nothing. She also left the wedding album on the kitchen table. I dropped it in the trash without opening it. The kids didn't understand. They were too young, too innocent. But they knew something was wrong. When I stopped by to pick up some papers, our daughter, oldest of the 3, peeked out from the living room. "Daddy?" she asked, small voice cracking. I froze. Every part of me screamed to go in, to hug her, to pretend that love was enough. But I knew it wasn't. Not yet. "Hey, sweetie," I said, keeping my distance. "Are you mad at Mommy?" I swallowed. That knife was sharp. "No," I said gently. "Just sad." She frowned. "Are you still my daddy?" That broke me. I crouched down, voice trembling. "I will always be someone who loves you, no matter what." She nodded slowly, then turned and disappeared into the house. I left the papers on the table and walked out before I shattered in front of her. The quiet in my new apartment was suffocating at first. No laughter, No footsteps. No toys on the floor to trip over. Just space. And time. I started therapy. A man needs help when his whole identity's been erased. The therapist asked me a question I didn't see coming. Do you blame yourself for staying so long? I did. But I also forgave myself for it. I forgave myself for believing in her. For trying. For loving too deeply, too blindly. That was my flaw. But it was never my crime. Weeks passed. The family reached out again. This time with fewer excuses. My mother admitted she'd let her love for the kids blind her. My father said nothing but sent a letter. A real one. Handwritten. Simple. You were right. I'm ashamed. I didn't write back. Maybe one day. Not today. Jessica didn't fight the divorce. Didn't fight custody. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe because she knew she didn't stand a chance. Either way, she faded like a ghost with no more secrets to haunt me with. It started with a knock. Soft. Hesitant. The kind you hear in movies right before a confession changes everything. I opened the door expecting a delivery. Instead, I saw her. My oldest, 15 now, but standing there like she'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. Her hands trembled around the sleeves of her hoodie. Her eyes. God. Her eyes looked like mine when I stared at myself in the mirror after that Sunday confrontation. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside silently. She walked into the living room, her steps unsure, like she didn't know whether she belonged anymore. I didn't blame her. She sat on the edge of the couch and looked around, like she was mapping a space that should have felt familiar, but didn't. Mom told me, she said finally. I didn't respond. She said that you're not my real dad. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't about to put a single word in her mouth. Not now. She said you're angry, that you don't want anything to do with us. That was the crack. The smallest one. But it was enough. I sat down across from her. Calm. Measured. I never said that. But you left, she whispered. I nodded. I did. Why? A beat passed. Then I said it. No filters. No comforting lies. Because your mom lied to me. For years. About a lot of things. About you. About your brothers. About who I was to all of you. Her lips trembled. So, you don't love us anymore? That hit harder than any betrayal. Than any courtroom or family rejection. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. You listen to me. I don't care what DNA says. I was there when you took your first steps. I read every bedtime story. I cleaned scraped knees, built school projects at midnight, stayed up sick next to your bed. I paused, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. That doesn't vanish because of a blood test. It just changes what I can be now. She wiped at her cheek, but I saw the tear anyway. Do you want me around still? She asked. Quiet, small, afraid. And I realized then, she was the one waiting for permission. Permission to still love me. Permission to believe I hadn't abandoned her. Even if everything else had crumbled. I nodded slowly. I'm not going back to how things were. I won't lie to myself again. But if you want me in your life, if you still see me as your father, then I'll be here. As long as it's real. No pretending. She stood up and walked to me, no hesitation now, and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. Just like she used to when she was 5 and couldn't sleep after a thunderstorm. I don't care what anyone says, she whispered. You're my dad. The boys came next. Not all at once. A few weeks later, the middle one texted, Can I come see you? Then the youngest called out of the blue, asking if we could play that old video game we used to battle over on weekends. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. And we didn't pretend it hadn't. I didn't call myself dad anymore. Not out of spite, but because they needed to redefine what I was to them. On their terms. They still visited. We still ate junk food. Played games. Argued over movie nights and music. But now it wasn't built on obligation. It was choice. Their choice. They chose to love me not because someone told them I was their father, but because I was, in all the ways that mattered. Jessica never stood in the way. Not anymore. Maybe guilt finally did something useful. Or maybe she knew any resistance would just backfire. Whatever the reason, she stayed quiet. She watched from a distance as the children slowly drifted back toward me. Not because I demanded it. There's a moment after every war when the smoke clears. Bodies buried, flags lowered, silence takes over. That's where I am now. Not in peace, but in clarity. I live alone now. 2 bedrooms. Simple furniture. Everything new. No ghost-haunted couches or beds soaked in old memories. My walls are clean. My house doesn't whisper anymore. Jessica is gone. Officially. Legally. Emotionally. We signed the final papers 3 weeks ago. No ceremony. No goodbye. Just a last scribble of ink and silence. Fitting. That's how betrayal ends, not in fire, but in cold. People ask if I've forgiven her. I laugh. Not because it's funny, but because forgiveness was never the goal. Closure doesn't need it. I've started therapy full-time. Not because I'm broken, but because I refuse to let the damage rot in silence. I've learned how to name the things I was never taught to name. Trauma, manipulation, emotional labor. I've learned how easy it is to confuse duty with love, and how dangerous it is to ignore your instincts because you're afraid of being alone. I forgave myself. Not her. Never her. But me for staying too long. For trusting too much. For loving someone who never earned it. I still see the kids. Not every weekend. Not with schedules or obligations. Just real. When they want to talk, I answer. When they want advice, I give it. I'm not their father by law anymore, but they still call me Dad, and I let them, because that word I earned. Not her. Not the men she lied with. Not DNA. Me. They know who raised them, who never flinched, never vanished, never turned away even after the curtain fell and the truth stood naked and sharp. I told them everything eventually, age-appropriate, honest, no sugar. They needed to know what kind of woman their mother is, not to hate her, but so they wouldn't become her. My family, they changed. At first, it was the usual chorus of guilt, tears, apologies, attempts to invite me to Sunday dinner again, like time could scrub away the betrayal. I declined. I didn't yell, didn't curse them out, just said, "You made your choice. I don't need vengeance anymore, just distance." Forgiveness is overrated. People think it's some divine act. But sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is not forgive. Just walk away, with your head up, and your soul intact. I kept one thing from the old house. Not the ring, not the photos, but a single note my daughter wrote when she was 9. Crayon scribbled, barely legible. "You are my hero. Love, Daddy." That piece of paper reminded me of who I was, of what I gave, and of what no lie could erase. I don't believe in happy endings anymore, just honest ones. This is mine. The truth came at a cost. My marriage, my family, my identity. But it gave me something back, myself. And when you've been living in someone else's fantasy for too long, that's more than enough. No more masks, no more apologies. Just one man, standing on scorched earth, finally breathing clean air. The war is over. She lost, and I survived.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.